last countdown, I talked about my least favorite finales in gaming. Basically, when the final level, final boss, and ending all come together to form a truly terrible finale to the game you're playing. As you would imagine, this list is the opposite of that. Same rules as last time, only one per franchise and only games I've played. And one aspect can cancel out the other, so with the Okami example again. The final boss of that game is the best final boss I've fought in any video game. However, the final level leaves much to be desired, so it's not going to be on this list. Also, since I've already done lists of my favorite final levels, final bosses, and endings, there are going to be some familiar candidates on this list. No worries though, I'm going to do everything I can not to repeat myself too much. Also, there were a lot of good candidates for this list, so don't get mad if a game you really like the finale of didn't make it on here. With all that said, let's begin. Choosing a number 10 was difficult, but eventually I decided on Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. First off, I really like the atmosphere of the Palace of Shadow. It has a really sinister feel to it. Admittedly, the areas and puzzles weren't that memorable, with the exception of the underground city. The area looked really cool, and it had a lot of interesting puzzles. I liked all the bosses as well. Gloomtail and the Shadow Sirens were pretty good, but what I really liked was when you got to the end and you got to fight Grotus, and then immediately afterwards you fought Bowser. Seriously, it's just hilarious how Bowser's random subplot finally comes to an end with a fight with Mario. Especially since said fight comes immediately after the fight with the guy who you thought was the main villain for the majority of the game. And then there's the most infamous part of this finale. Now, I will not deny for a second that the fight with the Shadow Queen is pretty friggin' hard. However, I really like it. I think the atmosphere and the awesome music mixed with the difficulty make for a really intense fight. And unlike certain other RPG final bosses, I didn't have to grind like crazy in order to beat the Shadow Queen. I didn't have to grind at all. I just had to come up with a good strategy. And by come up with a strategy, I mean steal and modify one from Chugga Conroy. But hey, it still works. Not to mention, the Shadow Queen herself is a whole new level of intimidating, and I'd argue that she's the most unsettling character in all of Paper Mario. And yes, I am including Super Paper Mario in this. And considering how screwed up Super Paper Mario is, that's saying a lot. And then we have the ending, and while it's not astounding, it is nice, and I do like that we get to see what all the major characters are doing after the events of the game, and how with most of them, Mario's adventure changed their life for the better. Kind of funny, really lighthearted ending after a super dark final boss. Okay, when's the last time I talked about King of the Pile? Over a year ago. Weird, seems more recent than that. I guess it just feels like I talk about that level a lot. It's like my positive equivalent of the meat circus. But before we get to King of the Pile, let me talk about the levels leading up to it. As you get closer to the end of Rabbids Go Home, the humans really start ramping up their defenses, and the last of each level type really gives a sense of finality to it. In the last Bubble Bed level, you see Betty and Barney's little subplot finally coming to an end with the two of them getting married, only for you to snatch Barney away, and at the end you have Betty desperate to get him back. In the last Sandra level, her boss doesn't roll over and let you take the Exile item since it's his safe, so he takes it with him and jumps out the window and you have to chase after him. And of course, in one of the last levels, you take the largest item in the game, an entire airplane. But anyway, flash forward to King of the Pile. You have one item left to put on the giant mountain that you've created. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. This is one of the greatest concepts for a final level I've ever seen. The entire point of this game was collecting stuff to build this pile. Literally everything you've done has contributed to this giant mass that you are now traversing. And let me tell you, it's not easy. Okay, it is, but not by this game's standards. And that's because the Verminators finally found you out. They finally traced you back to your massive pile of a home base and placed traps all over it. And for most of the level, the music is really somber. Maybe it's just because the game's about to end, but maybe it's also due to the fact that this giant pile that you spent the entire game contributing to has essentially turned on you. It was both your greatest creation and your greatest obstacle. The atmosphere of this level's really good too, with the gloomy night sky alongside the bright lights of the city that you've spent the entire game pillaging. Gameplay-wise, the level's pretty good too. It's a decent challenge and has a lot of memorable parts to it. Another interesting thing though is that you see a lot of stuff in the pile that you've seen in the game, but you didn't actually pick up. Either this was stuff that was thrown away from the past, or more likely, you weren't the only one collecting things. But towards the end of the level, the music really starts to pick up and gets happier, and you see a game over sign that was likely taken from an arcade, but is also there to say, yeah, the game is over now. And I like how the ending essentially makes both sides happy, because the humans were really the victims here, because the rabbits were just stealing all their stuff, and the rabbits, sure, they definitely weren't the good guys, but you were playing as them, and they probably didn't really know any better. So yeah, Rabbids Go Home's finale is really good, and honestly, Rabbids Go Home in general is a lot better than most people would think it is. And it's really the reason why I was kind of excited at the idea of a Mario and Rabbids crossover before we even saw the trailers. And when I saw the trailers, I was still excited because it looked pretty good. I missed the opportunity for an E3 video, so I gotta get my thoughts in somehow. Okay, what's the next entry? Hopefully one I have a lot to say about. Oh, you've gotta be kidding me. Look, the finale to BioShock Infinite is great. Phenomenal. It is more than deserving of being on this list. But I don't have anything else to say about it. Everything that I have to say about this finale, I already said in top 10 best endings. I can't add anything else to this.
But wait, the fossilizer.
Oh god, it's you. Look, when you interrupt in my other videos, that's one thing, but coming into my countdowns is a new low.
Come on, at least give me a chance. If you have nothing else to say about this, then why is it on the list?
Well, I'll tell you, Mr. Annoying Tour Guide who won't leave me alone. If I didn't put this on the list, then people would just be asking, hey, where the heck is BioShock Infinite? So really, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation.
Well, can't you give them at least something original? Maybe pick something out of your honorable mentions?
Sure, why not? Number 11's Orwell, but it's really similar to another entry on this list, so number 12 is Roundabout. It has a creative change in gameplay to match with what's going on in the story, and the ending itself is pretty funny. All of Roundabout's cutscenes are essentially parodies of those old FMV games that you typically see Brutal Moose reviewing. And the ending is a parody of those Where Are They Now segments at the end of those movies that were based off a true story.
Ronaldo died. I thought we made that pretty clear. There was that explosion and the news. Remember?
So yeah, BioShock Infinite's at this place on the list, but I spent the entire entry talking about a game you've likely never heard of at the suggestion of a somewhat cringy character who barely appears in my videos and you probably didn't know about either. Go figure. The last segment of LEGO City Undercover is truly something special. After the reveal that Forrest Blackwell is the main villain, which I have to say is a pretty good plot twist, you have to stop him from destroying all of downtown LEGO City with his rocket. And in that entire chapter, everything's on a time limit, and it feels really intense because, you know, LEGO City is about to go up in flames. And when you do manage to stop the exhaust from destroying everything, Dunby, for once, actually congratulates Chase. Keep in mind, this is the guy who's been ragging on you and inhibiting your every move throughout the entire game. To the point where if it weren't for Frank embarrassing him in front of the mayor, he wouldn't have even let you investigate Rex Fury. And here he is congratulating you. But it's not over yet. You still need to go after Blackwell and Rex Fury because they did kidnap Natalia. So you get in a rocket and head to Blackwell's base on the moon. Now admittedly, I don't find the level itself all that special, although I do like the music and I think it's pretty cool that, you know, you're on the moon. But things really start getting good when you make it to the end of the level. Basically, Chase encounters Blackwell, and Blackwell goes on this insane tangent about his plan that's both epic and hilarious.
No! I will not return to that society of blinkered fools. I tried building something truly wonderful for them. A self-contained world which they'd never have to leave. An utopian habitat that catered to their every whim and desire. It was a monument to my genius.
You were a great man once, Blackwell.
But you've gone crazy. Crazy?
Your monument was nothing more than an apartment block with a shopping mall.
Then the fight against Rex gets started, and holy crap is this an awesome concept. Chase is piloting a huge mech and is fighting Rex, who's riding on top of a robotic T-Rex, which you actually stole for him. Just like the level before it, the gameplay itself really isn't all that special, but the concept is more than enough for me to let that slide. But after the fight, Blackwell blows both of you up and leaves you on a smoldering platform plummeting through space, and Rex still wants to take you down for some reason. But once you beat Rex again, the platform completely breaks and you're left plummeting to the earth. And this is what really sells it for me. This is a segment so awesome that I've been wanting to talk about it for years now, but I've never really had a good opportunity to. You're left plummeting through space, all the way down back to Lego City, while the most epic music track in the entire game plays. And there's also a bunch of announcements from Blackwell. At first he's going on about how he's going to kill you, then he talks about how he's going to regroup and then come back to destroy Lego City, until it comes to the point where you hear a conversation on his escape ship saying that there's been a malfunction, and Blackwell escapes and abandons the rest of his crew. Truly a scumbag. I'm trying to describe it, but honestly, I can't really do it justice. You just have to play it for yourself. The ending itself's pretty good too, but I do have to ask the question, why didn't Chase arrest Rex Fury? I mean, I know it's implied that he wanted to start up a relationship with Natalia, but that's not stopping him from arresting the guy that he spent 2 games chasing. It's no big deal though, just a small nitpick on an amazing finale. You know, in Watch Dogs 2, I was really wondering how they were going to make the last mission in the game feel special. I mean, up until this point, you've done everything from stealing and defacing a car from an upcoming movie to going on a massive rampage with a giant spider robot. Well, here's how. They start off the mission by bringing up something that you don't really think about when you're playing the game, but yeah, is true. DedSec has a bunch of members, but it seems like Marcus is the one doing all the heavy lifting. Well, at the beginning of the mission, it turns out Dushan has labeled Marcus as a federal threat, so he can't even leave the hacker space without a bunch of agents trying to arrest him. So what do? Well, for the first few legs of the plan, you play as the other members of DedSec. First, you play as Satara, doing one last one of those puzzles to steal data from Dushan's personal assistant so you can get into Bloom headquarters. Once you're done with that, you switch over to Wrench and go on a rampage with a grenade launcher, blowing up all of Bloom's backup servers so you can cause a blackout. I'll admit, I was a little disappointed you don't get to play as Josh, but at the same time it makes sense. He seems like a much more behind-the-scenes guy than anyone else. Plus, it's clear he was doing his part. He was the one manipulating CTOS so Marcus can go out without being caught. But with all that done, it's time for the main attraction, to march right into Bloom headquarters and steal all the data exposing their crimes. Now, design and layout wise, there's not anything all that different about Bloom headquarters from the other areas you've infiltrated. But there is a big difference though, it's Bloom headquarters. For those of you who've never played, Bloom is the company that's been behind everything. Everything you've been working towards has been to take these guys down. You're finally there in the belly of the beast, and most of the employees don't even know what's going on. What does admittedly look pretty cool though, is when you finally make it to the servers and make them all rise up, giving DedSec access to them. And the ending? Yeah, it's pretty friggin' good. It starts off with Ray and Marcus heading straight to Dushan's office and telling him to his face that it's over. They've exposed everything. And there's one line that is so awesome that I just have to show it.
What happens if you actually answer it this time? Maybe it's Bloom sending you to face the firing squad alone. Or maybe it's your lawyer telling you there's no place to run. Maybe it's just a telemarketer. You really should answer it this time.
And after that, you see Marcus giving a pretty empowered speech to all the people who supported DedSec about the gravity of their accomplishments. The big difference between this and the other DedSec videos, though, is that in this, he actually shows his face, while in the others, it's done in a style similar to Anonymous. And right before the credits roll, you hear the news reporting on Dushan's arrest. A creative take on the final level, mixed with a super satisfying ending, make for a great finale. Okay, the next entry is Infamous 2. Now, I'm only counting the good endings, so that might seem unprofessional for this kind of list, but hey, my list, my rules. Now, I'm going to keep things concise here because I covered a lot of this stuff in much more detail on my top 10 endings list. So if you want to see a bit more in-depth analysis of this, I recommend checking that video out. To decide between the good and evil paths, you're met with a pretty complex choice. Sure, one option's definitely more evil than the other, but it's a lot less cut and dry than a lot of decisions in karma-based games, including decisions in this series. I get into the nitty-gritty, but that would take a while, and like I said, there's that other video to watch. The final level's really cool. Everything looks so apocalyptic as all of New Marais, even Bertrand's militia, comes together to help Cole take down the beast. And the final boss is pretty sweet as well. Granted, it's not as good as the final boss in Second Son, which made it onto my final battles list, but it's still pretty good. You start off by fighting the beast, taking down the big bad monster that's been built up throughout the entire game. However, before you can finish the fight, Quo shows up and you have to take her down. Throughout the whole game, Quo's been your friend and has always been the one who's been trying to push you towards the good guy route. However, now, due to reasons that are explained in that other video, she's siding against humanity. Well, not necessarily, just with the beast. Like I said, not that cut and dry. It's pretty darn cool taking out both of them, and you can even fly during this fight. And then there's the ending, which is the most beautiful ending I've seen in any video game. I would go into more detail on it here, but other video. Like I said, sorry. Since Nefarious isn't a very well-known game, I think I'll give it a bit of context. It's a game where you play as the bad guy, kidnap princesses, and try to take over the world. And that's about all you need to know for the rest of this to make sense. In the final level, you're ready to head back to Crow's castle to power up the Doom Howitzer in order to take over the world. However, before you can do that, Tephra shoots you out of the sky and you have to go back on foot. And the level heading back to the castle is pretty good. Since everyone is desperate to stop you from taking over the world, you have enemies from all the different levels in the game here trying to take you down. And let me tell you, the level itself is pretty challenging. The level itself looks really cool with the sunset in the background and all of Crow's castle decorations there that are just statues of himself. Did I mention this game was a parody of essentially all the supervillain cliches in video games? Probably the coolest part of the level, though, is when you're going through the wreckage of the Sovereign, which served as the hub world for the entire game. And at the end of the level, there's a boss rush against all the heroes that you fought throughout the game. Now, typically I would complain about something like this, but there's two big differences here. One, the bosses in Nefarious have very unique mechanics to them, and two, the fights don't really last all that long. But anyway, you make it to the Doom Howitzer and are ready to power it up. However, there's actually a choice here, which is weird. You wouldn't really expect a karma decision in a game where you play as the bad guy, but there is. You see, all throughout the game, Crow's bonded with the princesses that he's kidnapped, so you're offered a choice. Do you go through with your original plan or call it all off? Both endings are kind of satisfying in their own way, and I like the way they contrast each other. If you choose to activate the Doom Howitzer, then Mac shows up and uses a bunch of artifacts that were never mentioned before to power up into Hyper Mac. And the fight is super easy. Like, you have to be deliberately trying to lose in order to lose to this guy. The Doom Howitzer is that OP. Then again, it is a 3-phase final boss. And the ending's pretty much what you'd expect. Crow takes over the world and nothing can stop him. And after you see the montage of every kingdom falling, you see the princesses and prince that you kidnapped saying how they're disappointed that they thought that they had really won Crow over. And at the end of it all, Mayapple escapes and says she's going to start a rebellion against Crow and is surprisingly nice about it. If you choose to call it off though, Crow comes up with a hilarious excuse as to why they can't continue, and then Becky betrays him and starts up the Doom Howitzer herself. At the end of that really funny scene of dialogue that pokes fun at a lot of cliches, the fight starts and you're playing as Princess Mayapple. And let me tell you, it is significantly less easy than when you were the one controlling the Doom Howitzer. This is one of the hardest bosses I've ever faced. However, unlike the bosses on the last list, this one's hard in a good way. It's super challenging, but at no point does it feel cheap. Plus, I think it does a really good job at illustrating just how powerful this thing is, considering how easy the fight was when you were the one controlling it. Plus, it's super satisfying when you finally take it down. And the ending? Well, it's pretty much what you'd expect from a good ending. You see all the areas you've been to and everything's all great and happy and stuff, and after the credits, it gets revealed that both Crow and Becky managed to survive the ordeal. It makes no sense, but I'm not complaining because again, this is nefarious. This game is a parody of all that stuff. And in general, this finale was great. It showed a great contrast between the two opposing paths, the final level was nice, and it's freaking hilarious. Well, on to the game that I used to hint at this video, Batman Arkham City. Now admittedly, my definition of what counts as the finale for this game may seem a bit broad, but I honestly think it fits. It starts off with Protocol 10 finally being activated and Batman having to go to stop Hugo Strange. You have to grapple across a couple helicopters until you make it to Wonder Tower, the place that's been cut off for pretty much the entire game. But now you're finally infiltrating it, and you get a speech from Hugo Strange, and then a bunch of enemies to defeat. After scaling Wonder Tower, then things really start to get good. You get a scene with Hugo Strange, admiring his work, until Ra's stabs him, revealing that Strange was actually just a puppet in Ra's plan, but then Strange blows both of you up in a really epic cutscene. Ra's stabs himself in midair, then when you make it down to the ground, Joker reveals that he has Talia al Ghul captive and is holding her in the movie theater. Once you take out all the snipers that are aiming for you, and yeah, there are a lot of snipers on the buildings, you make it into the theater, and in another epic cutscene, it gets revealed that Joker was sick this entire time, and that healthy Joker was just a decoy. That decoy, being Clayface, also happens to be the final boss. And it's an admittedly easy fight, but it's also pretty cool. And then there's the ending, with Joker inadvertently causing his own death and everyone being shocked about it. I know I kind of sped through everything, but that's kind of how this finale is. It's just one epic, awesome moment after another. This next entry is probably the most obvious inclusion on this list. Not my favorite finale, mind you, but the one that most readily would come to mind when thinking of such a topic. Now, I don't know what the general consensus is when it comes to all games out there, but at least in terms of the ones I've played, I would have to say Portal 2. Just like the rest of Portal 2, the finale of the game decides, hey, let's take what we did in the original, but do it even better this time. The first thing I like about this finale is the introduction to it. It's pretty funny.
Well, this is the part where he kills us.
Hello! This is the part where I kill you.
You have to spend the entire chapter avoiding Wheatley's death traps, and the funny part about it is that while some of the death traps are a threat, others don't actually work because Wheatley's an idiot. It's hilarious hearing him get annoyed about how none of his death traps are working. And at the end of the stretch, we get some good dialogue from GLaDOS basically saying that the reason you should believe her that she's not just gonna betray you is the fact that for once, she actually has a conscience, and it's scaring the crap out of her. Then you make it to the final boss fight, and it's basically the original in reverse. With GLaDOS, you had to redirect her fire and then destroy her personality cores. However, with Wheatley, you have to stun him, then attach a corrupted core to him. This fight's an improvement though, because in the original, the room was static. Almost nothing changed, and you could portal just about everywhere. Here though, the space where you can portal is very limited because the paneling won't allow it, so you have to use all the gels to your advantage. Plus, the room itself is ever-changing because of all the explosions from Wheatley destroying the facility. And after you beat him, you have the moment that's so famous that just about everyone knows it at this point, where you shoot a portal at the moon and suck Wheatley out through it. And as you're out in space, Wheatley begs and pleads for you to let him back in because he can still fix things, but GLaDOS lets you know that she already fixed it and throws Wheatley out. Then, once Shell wakes back up, GLaDOS seems actually concerned about her and jokes about how dangerous she is before letting her leave. And on your way up, you get the turret opera, a shot of Companion Cube, then there's the credit song, which, just like last time, is sung by GLaDOS, but this one's significantly more fast-paced than Still Alive. So yeah, this finale fits just about every category in this list perfectly. The only question is, what can beat it? For number 1 on this list, I've chosen the final chapter of Sam & Max The Devil's Playhouse, The City That Dares Not Sleep. So what exactly happened here? Well, due to events that happened at the end of the last episode, Max is turned into a giant monster that's wreaking havoc on the city. But I'm getting ahead of myself. At the beginning of this episode, we have the narrator acknowledging that one of the characters will betray Sam and Max by the end of the episode. The first part of this has you in New York City with Max terrorizing the place, and you have most of the characters that were involved in both the Devil's Playhouse and previous seasons showing up. The most notable of which being Sybil, who played a major role in Season 2, and I'm assuming Season 1 as well, but was absent all throughout Season 3. The atmosphere in this part's really good, having sort of an apocalyptic feel to it as Max is destroying the city. After encasing the DeSoto in a giant corn dog, Sam, Sybil, and Paperweight all end up inside Max's body. And here's where I think things really start getting good. You do a bunch of puzzles that involve controlling Max's body. However, the cool thing about this is the fact that Max has absorbed all the toys of power, so now he's using them against you. That just seems to be a recurring theme on this list, isn't it? Someone or something that you thought was on your side turning against you. I don't know, I guess it's just a good way to make the player feel helpless in the final moments of the game. If there's one complaint I do have about this finale, it's the segments where you are controlling Max. Because there are certain places that you have to find, and they're very far apart, and everything looks the same. But anyway, you make it to halfway through the episode, and the narrator shows up once again, and reveals who the true villain is in a pretty hilarious way.
Have you figured it out yet? Is it Monsieur Paperweight and his hideous counterpart, Dr. Norrington, refugees from a dimension of pure evil? Or General Skunkape, driven mad by his insatiable lust for the toys of power? Sybil Pandemic, with her... Do you mind? I'm trying to... Oh, now you've just ruined it.
Yeah, that's right. The narrator was the villain the whole time. At least now we finally have an explanation as to why there was a narrator in the first place. His motivations for being a villain are actually pretty interesting. Basically, he's Max's superego, which, for those who don't know, it's the part of the brain that's in charge of all higher thought. And right away, you already know why he's pissed off. This is Max we're talking about. The guy who's never had a single complex thought in his life. As time went by, he got sick of his miserable existence because nothing he did had an impact on Max. He couldn't change anything. This is one of my favorite plot twists in any game I've played, right up there with some of the stuff I've seen in BioShock. Then there's the ending, which is also really awesome. Basically, after beating up Skunk Ape again and getting the Chthonic Destroyer, you're ready to cut out the tumor when Sybil's water breaks. Sam says they should all stay there to try to save Max, but Max disagrees. Max, for once in his life, actually thinks about someone else and says they should all leave so Sybil doesn't have to give birth inside a giant monster. Max's superego immediately hears this and decides that Max is worth saving after all, and tells everyone to leave and that he'll cut out the tumor himself. However, you see that he fails, and Max blows up. But Mama Bosco has a machine that can use Max's DNA to make a clone of him, but that actually fails as well. Max, the guy whose entire character was being a selfish jerk, granted a hilarious one, but still a selfish jerk, actually made a sacrifice and it cost him his life. Sam's distraught by this, and you see him during the credits, walking depressed through the streets until the credits are over. Then this happens.
Oh, hi, Sam!
Holy beer-battered princes of Maine and kings of New England in a glass-bottom boat with a trip-hop DJ and the second runner-up in the Miss Teen Oklahoma pageant. It's past Max in a time-traveling elevator.
What's shaking?
Max, I thought you were... Wait a second, where's the past me?
Oh, yeah, about that. We were on a case, and you got turned into a giant monster with electromagnetic powers, so I kinda had to blow you up. It was horrible!
Now you might think I'd be mad about this, sort of being a cop-out, but who really wants to see Max stay dead? Okay, I'm sure there are some people out there. But while the sad moments in the character development worked great and were really nice to see, it's also nice to see Max back in one piece and back to his usual self. With that great atmosphere at the beginning, the creative puzzles inside of Max's body, that awesome plot twist, and the heart-wrenching ending that actually manages to be happy in the end, I say that's enough to be my #1 video game finale. Although I will admit, it was a lot more of a toss-up than last time was. So many good choices. I am Defoffalizer, and I hope this countdown about finales made for a great finale to my countdown making career. Nah, just kidding, I don't plan on stopping anytime soon!